Welcome back to Unscripted from my studios here in Columbus, Ohio. Special guest today. I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. So yeah, can you introduce yourself, Leigh, and we'll go from there.
I think I'm supposed to start off with
But I'm a Carolina fan. It's okay. Yeah, well, it's a good place to start for sure.
My son might be at North Carolina State, but he wanted to go to Ohio State. And so, full disclosure, I have way too much knowledge about the Ohio State world. But anyway, I'm Leigh Brown, and I am in North Carolina. I'm in my office in Concord, which is in the center of the state. And of course, for the last 4 months plus, I've been doing Western North Carolina relief efforts post hurricane. I'm a lifelong North Carolinian, 25-year real estate broker. Got 2 kids that are launched out of the nest officially, although one bounced back. So we're hoping we'll boomerang her back out. And we've got a yard full of chickens, and I have a very patient husband. I don't know what else I could tell you, but does that give a start?
That's a great start. Yeah, actually, I don't know how we met. I know we're friends on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. And I don't know how. I assumed it was North Carolina basketball, maybe. I don't know. I have no idea.
It
But
could be Doug Heels, although Hubert needs to go. Let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. I love him, but it's time.
Yeah. And that's hard. That's really hard because, and I don't know anybody that would say, well, I hate Hubert Davis. I don't think anybody hates Hubert Davis. It's just not North Carolina basketball. And it's just not okay.
I the NIL because I don't think Hubert can coach them like a coach should, because there's got to be a fear amongst all coaches that you'll upset some precious pumpkin's feelings and mama will snatch them up and run off to another D1 school. And I think NIL's got to go. So we can just lab that into your podcast too. Let's just lay all the bombs.
Let's just take them all out one at a time. No, yeah, I agree. I think it's, I think there's a lot of factors in play there. And I don't know. Like I said, we could talk about it probably all day. I hope they get it right. And I really wanted Hubert to be successful because we like him so much. I mean, he's one of our own, so to speak. He's family, and so I don't like that they're struggling like they are. But something's got to change. It's just not. This is not the Carolina way, and that sounds like a spoiled Carolina fan saying that. But
no, but let's be honest. We're watching the Duke game. We're down by 30, and I'm thinking, just don't lose by 30. Oh, we only lost by 17. Woo! Wait a minute. Wait, what?
Yeah. I didn't even watch it, to be honest with you. And that's probably the first time I've been a fan over 30 years. And it was the first time I wasn't even excited. I didn't even know what time the game was on. And that's not. Anyway, yes. Okay. So and career-wise, what do you do in North Carolina? I think you mentioned that, but
yes,
what do you do there?
I'm a real estate broker and have been for 25 years. And that's right here in Concord in Cabarrus County in the center of the state. And prior to that, I sold chainsaws for Husqvarna. I was the only woman on the sales force. And then prior to that, I worked on Wall Street. So I've got quite a checkerboard of a background that all adds up to allowing me to be a busybody in many areas, frankly. I've got lots of bits of information.
Well, that's amazing. That's quite a career path and career arc, I should say. So I wanted to have you on today because, we follow each other on, social media. And I noticed a lot of what you were saying. And there's just so much, I hate to use the word because it's overused, but misinformation, disinformation out there.
Aaron, just call it lies. There's lies out there.
All right. We'll call them lies because I was trying to use the correct phrasing, but and they are. And I guess I wanted to have you on because I wanted to get someone who's close to the situation, and you've been very close to it. You've kept us updated on Twitter. I wanted to get a feel from someone who's there instead of whatever outlet is going to tell us whatever they're going to tell us. I know that President Trump was just there 2 weeks ago or a week ago, whatever it was, made some big promises, and I think those are moving quickly. I hope they are. But can you just give us an idea of just one, how devastating this is? I think we've seen so many pictures, but also just kind of what's happening in Asheville.
Well, the first thing I wish people could get their heads around is that when you look at the picture of North Carolina online, it looks like we're a small state, and it looks like that's a little skinny area, but North Carolina geographically is a very wide state, and the area that was impacted by the Hurricane Erin is the same size as the state of Massachusetts. So that's how big of a geographic area that's been impacted. And in that geography, you have varying topography. You have some rolling hills as you get down towards Burke County, and then you go up all the way to Mount Mitchell, which is the highest peak east of the Mississippi. You've got urban areas like Asheville, and then you have communities like Minneapolis that most people don't even know exist to this day. So it's a broad array of impacts and also a broad array of needs, which is where my frustration comes in, because I can joke and call the misinformation lies, but in reality, what's happening is that there are multiple realities going on. Asheville is in better shape because, of course, the resources went to the urban center first because you can impact the most people, and the infrastructure wasn't destroyed there like it was in the back counties where it's more rural in nature and more mountainous. So those areas are still dealing with roads that aren't fixed. I hit one 2 weeks ago in Avery County. I was trying to get to a site that I could report back to emergency management on behalf of the residents who are so frustrated and they're dealing with trauma. So when they're using somebody like me as a mouthpiece, it's because they're maxed out. And I just don't think there's been any focus on that, about how somebody whose life washed away and they've been trying to manage hotels or a camper or this, and I don't have a car and my work's gone and kids got to go to school. The ability of the human to process that is really limited. So when several neighbors told me about this one particular situation, I got in my little Ford Explorer and I go cruising around to find it. You can't get there because there's a big hole in the road still next to the river. And the neighbor who lives there came out and we were chatting a little bit, because the perk of me being a North Carolinian and with real estate all over my car, I'm not the bad guy, because the government is the bad guy to a lot of people. And that's not new and unique to this storm. This is why some people live in the Western North Carolina areas, to get away from government influence. So we're talking about the fact that this road hasn't been touched in 4 months, and the guy who lives on the other side of it is still using a side-by-side to get around to go get his groceries or get anything that he needs. And all they wanted was for somebody to know so it could be fixed. And we've talked to several agencies. So this goes to, is it better since President Trump came? Well, I am beyond excited that North Carolina got a mention in the inauguration speech, that we were one of his very first stops. In fact, his first stop out of DC was North Carolina. But the challenge we now have is, if you have a promise at the top, it's got to go through the state. Well, we have a Democratic governor whose goals are not necessarily aligned with President Trump's goals. So what's going to happen with those dollars? And then the local governments are going to want to get their piece of the pie too. And you know who misses out is the taxpaying citizen who's in need right now. So the money is bottlenecked, and I don't know how long that's going to take. In fact, there was a report yesterday, and of course we're recording this on February 4th. Yesterday, there was a report out of Raleigh that said the $100 million that the state had allocated still hasn't been dispersed because the treasurer's office hasn't set up their committee yet. And I can cast blame on the current treasurer who's been in office for a month, but I can also blame his predecessor who could have gotten this stuff set up right after the storm. And it just feels like there's a missing sense of urgency is the best way I could put it. So Asheville is back up and running in a lot of regards. The Biltmore was open for Christmas, and you have some of your breweries are coming back online, but you also have Biltmore Village is going to be closed for quite some time. And then you have the outlying areas. Fairview had some massive tornado damage. Good ways till that's fixed. Burnsville still, they're trying to get things back together, but it's so uneven. If you watch the videos and you watch the photos online, it gives you a sense of it. But what can't be described is what it's like to drive through this. And everywhere you'll see a trailer house that was taken out by a landslide. You'll see cars in the river. You will see just trash everywhere, whether it's people that are getting their houses mucked out or it's stuff that floated away and landed in trees. It feels like a third world war zone. And even in Asheville, because they might have downtown cute, but if you go down River Road, it's crazy. And then Tunnel Road, which is where the homeless lived, that's still a mess too. And of course, I know a lot of people are curious about the death count and who all perished in this storm. Well, there were a couple hundred homeless people living on Tunnel Road, and the homeless agencies said from the beginning there was no way to count. They're not going to count, wouldn't have any way of knowing who was over there. And my heart just sunk to hear that, because we can't just pretend like a homeless person is no longer human. That is the end of our society if we stop realizing that, Yes, they might have challenges and problems and addictions and needs. Doesn't make them less human, but
Sure.
their numbers weren't even considered. So I don't know, I could ramble about this forever. All I'll say is there is no easy answer. There is no easy solution because you're talking about such a vast array of challenges.
And a lot of red tape, it sounds like.
So much red tape. And
Yeah.
what I've discovered, that meme of all the little Spider-Men that are pointing at each other? I
It's
need
one
to
of my
take
favorites.
one of those and make it, because you have the counties pointing at FEMA. FEMA points at North Carolina. North Carolina points at the EPA, who points at DEQ, and the person who gets left out is the taxpayer. But that's what it feels like, is a bunch of blame game. And at the heart of it are people who are not being helped in the country they live in with a storm they had no control over. It's not like the great foreclosure crisis where you could say, you maybe shouldn't have bought that house. No, the house washed away. What are these people supposed to do?
Yeah, it's we had a tornado come through Columbus area. It was south. No, I'm sorry. It was west of Columbus, probably about an hour away. But anyway, it was just a freak tornado. Not the same thing, but I remember my wife and I were driving through the state, and we cut through that way and got to see the devastation, as you said. And I couldn't believe it. Cars look like Matchbox cars. They had these kind of like TP type hotels. They're like triangles, they were like laying on one another, billboards just completely, just bent, like huge billboards just bent and blown out. And I don't know. It was just like you said, trash everywhere, just destruction. And it looked like something out of a movie. I felt like we were driving through a movie set, one like a crazy catastrophic movie. It was just, and so I can't imagine. And like you said, I don't even think they knew this was coming. I mean, they had no idea, or at least to the level. It's just devastating.
Well,
I mean,
the
it's
weather
incredible.
reports show a storm, and even if it's a hurricane when it hits Florida, you would get the bands, the far outer bands that are so diminished by the time they get here. So a lot of people, they didn't leave home because they didn't expect it to be a once in 1,000-year flood, which is what it was.
Yeah.
And that's part of the challenge here. This is not areas that are accustomed to flooding, and not that Florida gets used to it. And I don't want to diminish what they go through, or even on the coast of North Carolina. But when they hear hurricane, they know they got to go bag, or you're staying, your hurricane party's this, and here's what we do if the power's out, boom, boom, boom. It's never happened up here. Or if it's happened, it was before recorded history. And I can't help but I see it too when I talk to the survivors, and I ask them if they'll share me their photos and their video, and they'll show me, and I'll say, where were you? Like, I was in the house. And then I realize I should get out. So they barely get in the truck and get up the driveway, and then everything's underwater because when it's rushing, and again, that topography, it's the rush of coming down mountain. And so some of your up mountain areas had landslides, but the bulk of your real water issues were a little bit down mountain because the water was gathering steam. And I think that's a thing that doesn't happen in the coastal areas because they're flat by nature. But people would show me their collateral, Aaron, and I'm thinking, how do you do this? They're like, I couldn't, I was frozen and I was watching it. And I said, I couldn't believe this was happening. So they're just standing there watching their life wash away because it felt like a movie. I said, I bet it did feel like a movie, and you didn't want to be in it. And now you're on the other side of it thinking, well, now what?
I think we got to see, obviously, we've seen a lot of the worst of us in this thing, and some of it just being nature itself. But there are times where we do get to see the best of us. And I think we've talked about the red tape. And again, I'm just going off of what I've seen. And so I don't know if it's accurate, but I did see, NASCAR, I believe, provided, I think it was like 100 homes, just tiny homes. I saw something where the Amish came in and built homes in like 4 days or something on their own dime.
Yeah.
I know Samaritan's purse was there right away, one of the first people to be there. And the beauty of those things is there's no red tape. You don't have to, back to your point earlier about the money, they don't have to worry about those things. They just respond. And it's been neat to see, but you usually see that first reaction and then people just go on with their lives. And I think that's what I wanted to have this conversation with you too today is let's not forget they're probably going to be years.
I'll just point out with NASCAR, Greg Biffle, the retired driver, he was the one that spearheaded that. So we got to give a shout out to Greg and his wife, Christina, because they were one of the first ones to say, we got a helicopter, let's go doing rescue missions. And then they got NASCAR involved with the tiny houses. And also, he and Christina built a relationship with Starlink very early because we lost power in such a huge region. We basically lost internet. And since people don't have landlines, this was the only way to find people besides ham radios. And he was out there putting out Starlinks. So just trying to reach people in all these different ways, and so much faster than the government response, which is exactly the American way of, we don't need permission, we just go take care of it. And Samaritan's Purse, they had their trucks in Boone on Saturday, the 28th. And of course, they're from the mountains. That's where Billy Graham was from, Montreat. Franklin Graham lives there. Montreat was devastated. But still, even though their hometown is devastated, their trucks are on the ground right away providing services. And they've got a wait list for volunteers. They've done so much mucking out and just great, great work. Can't recommend them enough. And who else did you mention? You mentioned
the Amish.
Oh, the Amish. So what's hilarious there is everybody wants them to come back, but you can't call them because they don't have telephones or internet. So you kind of have to wait until they show up unless you have a friend who can have a friend inside the community. But it was just beautiful to see them come. Of course, what they're building is higher quality than anything else you can get. And currently, we're working with a friend of a friend in that community in Pennsylvania. They may be coming back to rebuild some barns for our farmers because our farmers need to start thinking about getting their businesses back up and running and taking care of livestock. And of course, part of the mountains that was hit was Avery County, and Avery's the Christmas tree capital of the world, the highest county seat in the Appalachians. And a lot of the Christmas tree farms experienced landslides. It took out their barns and their balers. So while some of the farms had their best year ever, as amazing people supported North Carolina tree farms, some of the farms were unable to take advantage of that outpouring of goodwill. So all I can say is, for the next several years, buy a North Carolina Fraser fir and go back to your fake tree in the future, but get back to the real trees for a while. So we're hoping that we can get them to come back. But it is wonderful to see the neighbors stepping up and just figuring out who needs what and let's go do it. So I'm, of course, one of the tiny organizations that cropped up a ton. Valley Strong with Jason Ward. Jason's amazing. We've had Stephanie Johnson over in Burnsville starts rebuilding hollers. You've got a ton of organizations that are just grassroots, and we've all worked together. So what do you need? Well, here's what I need. And can you help me with this? And there's a way to create a fabric of the best of America to take care of the best of America. So when I talked to the interim FEMA director, because he's a stand-up guy, I really hope President Trump puts him in there as the permanent director. He was asking me and the other grassroots people, he's reaching out to all of us. What do you need? How can I help? How do we fix this? What is the action plan? So I gave him like my 6 pages of notes. But if FEMA just funded the efforts of this tapestry on the ground, you could have helped a lot of people a lot faster instead of FEMA thinking they needed to be the boots on the ground, because they didn't. If you're a cubicle worker in DC, you probably don't need to be in the backside of Yancey County. Just saying. But you could absolutely fund those efforts so that we could take care of people faster. So there's a lot of good things that have happened and a lot of good that will come out of this, because I have to believe that President Trump's agenda of streamlining and making our bureaucratic agencies more efficient is not just to make North Carolina whole, but it is for all the areas that will be impacted by storms, that we can make the system work for the people instead of the people working for the system.
And that's, I think, really, as someone on the outside, that's all we would want too. I mean, and it's not even, this isn't even a political thing. It's, I don't care who's in office. Let's just get it done. And, I think his business mindset certainly will help. He wouldn't accept something like this going on in his business if things weren't getting done, or, his construction projects. I'm sure he wouldn't just sit there and go, oh, we got to wait. No, he, again, that's not a political rant either way. It's just, that's the nature of a man that his entire career has been business versus, government. And so I think the government probably does get used to that's just the way things are. And that's why he is a bit of a disruptor. And some people are very uncomfortable with that, because he's not that kind of guy. It's, well, no, if it's not working, then don't do it that way anymore. And I think in this case,
of us, that's what we voted for. We voted for a disruptor who's not perfect, but who's willing to ask questions and bring people in to ask questions about how do we make this better. That's how I run my business. It's how all of us should be operating our lives. How can I do something to make this better?
Right.
And that's absolutely not partisan. It's common sense, which
sure.
That's the party that needs to come back, is the common sense party.
Yeah, across the United States, I think common sense is certainly
Not common.
something that we'd love to see. We'd love to see back again. So, for those listening, just kind of to wrap up, what's a good place? Is there a good resource for like the real news, like really what's happening there? Do you know of a website or something that where people can really get the best information about? That way we don't forget about what's happening.
I would say that your best source of information is either TikTok or X, because many of us have been censored on Facebook and Instagram. We don't really know why, because none of this, as you said, is partisan. So the weirdest thing ever is that if I am critical of FEMA as an agency, my posts get suppressed, which to me is absolutely insane. And there should be no protection of a bureaucracy. They should be more open to scrutiny because they're funded by me as a taxpayer. But I will say Matt Van Swal is probably the best follow on X or Twitter, however you want to reference it. Matt lives in Asheville, and he's very much on top of reporting things as he finds them out. This has become his full-time job, although he still sells cameras for a living. So support Matt. And he's probably the good place to start. The local news has really surprised me because your micro local news tends to be one of your best resources, but we haven't really seen that come out of the mountains. And my guess is because those papers, those journalists are dealing with their own trauma with the storm, so they haven't gotten into the real reporting. Now you got Aeroponic Farm. She's out of Madison County. She's a wonderful resource. You just have to be thoughtful. So my suggestion is if you find somebody reporting out of Western North Carolina, check and see if they're North Carolina people, because if they're not, it's entirely possible they're looking for clicks and taps. And I would also just suggest that you take a look at their timeline and see if they've been involved in this stuff or if they're rising up. And at this point, being a little over 4 months in, there's only a few of us left that are still focused on it because a lot of the overnighters came in, did a lot of great work, and have moved on to other projects. But the work is going to continue for a long time. And my particular angle, my organization is Patriot Relief, and our Facebook page is facebook.com/Patriot Relief, which that's the easiest way to reach a lot of people. Funny enough, I can't post on my personal, but I can post on Patriot Relief, but whatever. So I'm looking at the way that this is going to work. We're focused on housing, and we're focused on helping people stay in their homes. So if they didn't have insurance coverage or they didn't have any response from FEMA or flood or any of that, but they want to stay at home and they don't have the financial resources, we're helping with roofs and HVAC and mucking out houses, cutting out trees, doing driveways. So we're doing those projects that are focused on helping American citizens stay in their properties. I'm also working with our North Carolina legislature on providing some feedback as they craft the next tranche of bills to come provide some relief to those that are trying to rebuild. And everybody's got a different focus. Samaritan's Purse is doing they've ordered a whole bunch of mobile homes, so they're replacing homes. We're doing a couple of those, but our focus is primarily going to be on repairs. The Baptist men are kicking tail. They're doing wonderful. So if you want to volunteer, follow with the Baptist men, follow with Samaritan's Purse. You can follow my organization, because if I don't have a need for you, I'm going to connect you to Baptist men and Samaritan's Purse anyway. So we're all interacting, which makes me really proud as an American and as a North Carolinian that there is no siloing. This is all hands on deck, and that's how we fix things.
It is, and that's the American spirit. Unfortunately, in the midst of tragedy is a lot of times where we are still true. We all do truly care about each other, and we want the best for one another. Even if our neighbors, we don't get along about whatever it might be, if something happens, we do rush to one another's aid. And so I'm so thankful for that. And I was going to ask you that. So in terms of if people want to make donations, if they want to serve, if they want to come and help, you just mentioned 3 different places that they can do that. Can you list those again? I know Samaritan's Purse is one, and they're
SamaritansPurse.org. The Baptist men, I don't know what their website is, but you can reach out to me through my website if you want to get connected to the Baptist men's group, and we can connect you to them. And then we are patriotrelieffund.com, and I am a 501c3. All donations are tax deductible to the extent allowed by law. So that's all on the website, but you can also sign up to volunteer there. And like I said, if your dates don't fit our projects, we're going to connect you to somebody so that you can come help your neighbors out. I mean, it's a beautiful opportunity to come to the mountains and spend the night, because a lot of our Airbnb hosts would love to have some guests come in. Our restaurants would love to have you come eat. And then you can go help somebody who would normally be the one helping somebody else, but now they're reluctantly accepting help, because that's been the number one thing I've heard as we've served in North Carolina. Somebody needs it more than me. All of our recipients have tried to push us to somebody else. And I keep saying, we'll help them too. We're going to help you as well, because there's definitely a desire to not take. People would like to give, but this is a moment when, whether they want to admit it or not, there are people that need a little boost, and now's the chance to help each other out.
I love that. I love your energy and your joy, even in the midst of a very difficult time there. And just,
Well, you know
I
why?
guarantee.
You know where the joy comes from.
Where's
Listen,
that?
God is working some mighty, mighty miracles in the mountains.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of people who have come to salvation through Jesus in all these interactions. They have seen God's provision and how precise it is. I could talk about that part for days. And so if your audience wants to hear more about the miracles I've seen, they should comment, like, give you 5 stars, and support you on all the platforms and tell you about it. And then I can come back for part 2, but I'm not coming back unless y'all ask Aaron for it. So I just point that out. You got to give 5 stars and a comment, and then I'll come back.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for that endorsement. That's wonderful.
That's a quid pro
And
quo.
I agree with you. What's that?
That's a quid pro quo.
That's right. I appreciate you certainly bringing up the Lord's hand in this, because I think it would be very easy to go the other way and say, how could he allow this? And that's anything in our life that like that.
Well, because 2 Chronicles 7:14 explains it, and y'all have to look it up on your own.
Okay. Well, you do have to come back. So even if I have to go give my own self 5 stars, because like 3 people listen. So like,
I don't know, there might be 4. Once you post this on X, you're going to have at least 4, maybe 5.
there we go. All right. So yeah, if anybody, yeah, I will share this appropriately. And I'm so thankful for your time. I know you're very, very busy, and I do hope you can come back on it, because I'd love to hear the stories. I'd actually like to follow up again and just hear, maybe in a few months, how are we doing? How are things going there? Are they, moving along? And I certainly hope anyone that is listening does, get behind those organizations as well, especially the ones that you have mentioned. And that's all we can do from our part. If that's all you can do, or if you can do more, by all means, do more. But thank you so much for coming on today and just sharing the story of what's going on there.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for shedding the spotlight on Western North Carolina. And we appreciate the prayers, we appreciate the support, and we appreciate the opportunity to keep an eye on the ball and keep moving.
Well, I'm not a transplant in North Carolina. I just love North Carolina. I love the state. I love the Outer Banks. I love the entire state. We almost moved to Charlotte once. I mean, I don't know why, but my heart has always been in North Carolina. I don't have any family there or anything like that. I do have a lot of friends, but that live there. But anyway, I love North Carolina, and I just want to see it continue to come back.
Well, thank you, Aaron. We appreciate you.
All right. Well, go Heels, I guess. We'll talk soon. Thank you so much.